Thanks for coming tonight to the Duxbury Powder Point Bridge Replacement Project dual-purpose meeting. One is the consulting parties meeting for historic determination, and the second is a public information meeting. The reason why they're together is that they inform each other, and you kind of can't talk about one without segueing into the other. Next slide, please. Agenda this evening, as I just stated, consulting parties meeting. Going to go over bridge history, historic determination, and then we're going to segue into the public information meeting on where our thoughts are at. One thing I want to remind you all is we are engaging in this public information process far earlier than normal, and that's good because you're involved. But I please ask you to be patient with us when we say we're not sure yet. We haven't gotten there yet. It's just important because you can't both come early and have all the answers. I know there might be a little frustration around that. It's an important thing to keep in mind. Another thing, this isn't the only time we're coming here. We plan on coming several times because we know how important this bridge is to the community and we know how much back and forth there needs to be. So I just want to table set with that before I start plowing into this preordained presentation. Once we get to the bridge design meeting, we do environmental consideration, design goals, initial thoughts on bridge design, including some constraints due to federal requirements and state requirements, construction, and next steps. Slide, please. Introductions. Myself, Marco Pereira, project manager with MassDOT Major Projects. We have Jeff Shrimpton, the program engineer for design in our environmental section. Kurt Jurgensen from Historic. George Batchelor to represent architecture, landscape architecture. And Shane Souza from our District 5 bridge section, who can speak on, should it come up, maintenance issues and the like. From the bridge design team, we have Peter Wu, who's the HDR, our consultant project manager, Tony Santoro, who's the deputy project manager, and Ben Holsapple, the HDR lead structural engineer. Slide. With that, Jeff? Or sorry, Kurt, I apologize.
Are these on? Or? I mean, I can stand at the main.
I should introduce myself. I should, yeah. Good evening. Oh, this is not on.
Oh, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gareth Saunders, and I'm from MassDOT's Legislative Affairs Office. So if we have any elected officials, local or state officials, I'm your point of contact on this project. Thank you. We're going to have a very lively presentation, and most of the questions we'll try to hold to the end of the presentation, but feel free to ask whatever questions you may want to. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Gareth. So we're here tonight to discuss Powder Point Bridge, as I'm sure you're all aware, and the Section 106 process and National Register eligibility status of the bridge, specifically to start things off. Next slide. So a little history on the bridge. The bridge at this site was first built in 1891. That was also a timber pile trestle structure. In 1983-1984, the bridge was submitted to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, which is the state historic preservation office, for consideration of its historical status. At that time, the SHPO determined that the bridge was National Register eligible, despite having undergone successive rounds of repairs and replacement of original material. A few years later, in 1985, the bridge was damaged by fire, and as repairs were being undertaken to address the damage done by the fire, it was discovered that there was significant deterioration present, and the town decided it was prudent to replace the bridge entirely at that time, and a new structure was built and opened in 1986. Since that time, the existing 1986 bridge has also undergone extensive repairs, and those repairs have gotten more costly and come more frequently as time has gone on and the bridge has aged. Okay, the historic determination of the current bridge. Mass DOT Cultural Resources, including myself, took a look at the 1986 bridge and the existing National Register eligibility determination from 1984, and we felt that it was warranted that we submit additional information for consideration to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, which we did in November of 2024. Due to the existing bridge having been built in 1986, fully replacing the 1891 structure, the State Historic Preservation Officer determined that it was no longer National Register eligible, concurring with MassDOT's eligibility opinion. There's a benchmark for buildings, structures, and sites to be considered eligible for listing in the National Register. Typically, 50 years is the benchmark, and anything that's younger, unless there are extraordinary and exceptional merits to be considered, any structures and buildings less than 50 years old will be considered ineligible. Next slide. Okay. As far as design considerations for the proposed replacement bridge, we are here to consult with the citizens of Duxbury, local stakeholders, anybody interested in the bridge and its presence within the community. And we are interested in listening to you, your thoughts, opinions, ideas, and we want to build a context-sensitive bridge that fits into the landscape where it's located. We are fully open to considering aesthetic elements to incorporate into the proposed new design that reflect the character of the community and can reflect the existing bridge as much as we possibly can. But we are required to meet certain standards, one of which is to provide a structure that will provide a 100-year service life. That is a standard that MassDOT has defined for new bridges to be fiscally responsible and avoid throwing money at structures year after year after year if we can avoid it. And more details will be discussed later in the presentation on aesthetic considerations that we're thinking about and could potentially include. But as I said, we're fully open to new ideas and options that anybody may have to present. Next slide. So at this point, I'll open it up briefly for questions specifically about Section 106, that process, the National Register eligibility status of the bridge, everything that I've been discussing right now.
If you have any questions, just come on down and line up in front of one of the two mics, and then you can ask your question. Thank you.
So
Yes.
my question is about the federal 106 process. In Chatham, they rebuilt their bridge 3 times since the 1800s, including, like our bridge, in the 1980s. And the Federal National Park Service designated it eligible for 106 status, even though it had been rebuilt in less than 50 years, because the town considered the wooden Chatham Bridge relative to the identity of the town. And I believe you're not including, you're saying that the state Historical Commission also ruled that Chatham was not historic. The state DOT ruled Chatham was not historic. The citizens went to the National Park Service and they got it labeled historic, not as part of the National Historic Register, but as eligible. That set off a design review of context sensitive. And if we don't get the federal designation, we then leave it up to the state DOT to work with the town to decide what is context sensitive, but they don't have to agree. Whereas a 106 letter from the feds saying Duxbury Bridge is in fact historic, has been there since the 1880s, has been rebuilt like the Chatham Bridge, needs a eligibility 106 designation, so that if a new governor comes along, new state DOT personnel, it doesn't matter. The citizens will have a National Historic eligibility letter from the feds, and it will ensure us getting a bridge that we want for our town rather than something that the state DOT engineers decide. So I feel today you saying that the state didn't rule it historic. It's true, they didn't rule the Chatham Bridge historic, but I think the audience should know that we need a review by the National Park Service to ask the citizens whether historic, and I bet you 99% of Duxbury would consider this bridge historic. I'd also like to point out that their process hired outside consultants to help with the design review rather than just the Taunton engineers. And so you're asking about consulting on 106. I think our town needs to put a letter into the Federal National Park Service 106 and to also do the project the way Chatham did, so that we have more capability to design a historic structure.
Thank you very much for your comments. Starting out at the top, a clarification. Section 106 is a federal process. It is incumbent upon federal agencies, such as the Federal Highway Administration, who we are working closely with, to consider the effects that all federal undertakings will have on historic structures. So there isn't a lower level state process that's happening. Section 106 is the umbrella. It is a federal process. MassDOT Cultural Resources Unit has been delegated certain responsibilities from Federal Highway with the approval of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the agency that is tasked with overseeing Section 106 as a whole. And we have been engaging with the beginning stages of the Section 106 process, namely identifying an area of potential effects and considering what historic properties may be within that area, and determining whether they are or are not National Register eligible. So that's where we are in the process right now. We have looked at Powder Point Bridge, and simply it was replaced entirely. You know, every piece of timber that had been on site was pulled out and replaced with new material in 1986. So that's our starting point. And we presented a case to the State Historic Preservation Officer, and she agreed with that case. Yes, the town is entirely within, you know, the citizens are within their rights to submit additional information, submit any material that you may have that contradicts the current National Register eligibility determination. That can be submitted to Federal Highway Administration, our Massachusetts Division Office, and they will provide that information to the Federal Preservation Officer at headquarters in Washington. We'll be able to provide information for that later in the presentation. That will allow the Federal Preservation Officer to start an appeals process with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and the keeper of the National Register.
And the town can send a letter directly to Joy Beasley, the national keeper, without going through the state highway or federal highway. You can send a letter directly to Joy Beasley, like Chatham did, to ensure the historic process.
All due respect, that's not ensuring a historic process. Section 106
what
is incumbent. Like, it is a requirement that Federal Highway has to meet in order to build a project. There's no, well, maybe it won't happen.
No.
It will happen.
But you're saying the citizens should send the letters to the state but
Yes.
the citizens can also, as they have already, sent letters to Joy Beasley,
Yes.
keeper, directly, without going through a review. And like they did in Chatham, even though the bridge was rebuilt within 50 years, they can get a historic designation. But if Mass Highway gets a historic designation, it requires context sensitivity. If you don't get a 106, you are saying you will do context sensitivity, but you're not required.
We are required. Our design guide has context sensitivity as one of the hallmarks of the designs that we provide for every project. Furthermore, NEPA requires, the National Environmental Protection Act requires community consultation and considering the context of projects and what effect they will have on the community. So Section 106 is not the be-all and end-all.
No,
NEPA
but
is also there.
the state in Chatham wanted to do an asphalt roadway. The citizens wanted a wooden plank. The 106 designation and the citizens led to a wooden plank like the current bridge, and the state highway objected, but having National Historic Register eligibility, the context made the citizens. And as some have announced out in the hallway, this process, you would like to also do an asphalt bridge. Well, maybe some people in Duxbury want a wooden top bridge with current materials underneath. And a 106 National Historic Register designation would let that context of what the citizens want to be part of the process. That's all I'm
I think at this point that we're really getting into some of the aesthetic considerations
Right.
and the discussion that we're going to have.
But I
as
just,
the
I don't,
pre-
I don't
the
think your presentation
progresses.
that it's not historic, the state, it's what, the same thing happened in Chatham. The state didn't rule it as historic, National Historic Register did. So I'm just saying, I think the town should send letters directly to Joy Beasley and see if we can get it on eligibility. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. I don't know, are you finished? We should move on with the
Yeah.
presentation? Yeah. So at this point, we're going to move on to the rest of the presentation, and once that's completed, we'll open it up for questions again. Thank you for your statements, ma'am, and your questions. Thank you.
And just to be clear, even at the end, we can continue the historic discussion. It's not shut down, but maybe you'll have more information to consider as we go through. Now that you heard what you didn't want to hear, I'm hoping to offer a little light on where our head's at with it and what our initial thoughts are. Next slide, please. So I don't need to tell you where this bridge is. You all know, but for maybe hard of hearing, I'll say it's on the east side of Duxbury, and it's the only access directly from Duxbury to the beach. You can see it there in brown. Next slide. Bridge condition, it's not great, you know this. Entirely timber structure with metal fasteners. It's in serious condition due to the marine environment, has some steel and fiber reinforced polymer repairs. In 2013, 40% of the piles were repaired with fiberglass jackets. By 2024, only 14% of the fiberglass jackets remained, and vehicles traveling over the bridge are limited to no more than 4 tons in weight. Slide. The bridge requires a special member inspection due to its poor condition every 6 months. The town is investing $300K per year to complete short-term repairs, and another $15K per year from Town Highway Department for short-term bridge repairs, specifically ongoing deckboard maintenance. Next slide. Again, we're just reiterating the same points. To construct a context-sensitive bridge, the key for us, and again, this is looking through the lens of the non-historic eligibility, the pending challenges notwithstanding, we are obliged to build a bridge with a 100-year service life, and that's MassDOT standards, just so that we're not the only bad guys. The Federal Highway Administration, who is the funding authority, has a 75-year design life requirement. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Again, historic domination notwithstanding, we'll keep that in the back of our mind, understanding that if it goes in that direction, some of these things are moot. Next slide, please. So, what are we thinking? We know that the Mitchell River Bridge is the closest example. It's not the same. First, let's start there. It's not the same bridge. It doesn't have all the same elements, but it's a good example to start with. And we've heard from members of the community that there's a lot of corollary context. So, again, through the lens of not historic, we asked ourselves, well, all that aside, what should we do for the community? What kind of bridge should we attempt to start the conversation on? And I want to reemphasize, we are just starting the conversation. We are very early in the process. Decisions have not been hardened or made, and we intend on coming back a lot. All that having been said, I want to emphasize where we are at already. One of the things we're at already is the substructure elements, namely the piers and pier cap. What they did in Chatham, we can do here. Those are concrete-filled steel piles with concrete form-lined pile caps. As you can see, they used wood to form-line the concrete, and against the relief of the Mitchell River Bridge, it doesn't look bad. I'm sure reasonable people can disagree, but it is something that a bridge with a historic designation did in fact employ. And then we are already saying we can give you a wood railing similar to or something you all are in favor of in a similar way, but that does come with uncomfortable conditions as to the bridge cross-section. And then I want to emphasize, those conditions are a function of design standards, not a function of what we want, so to speak. And when HDR gets into the presentation, you'll see more of that. And we expect that's where a lot of the robust conversation is going to go as we meet and meet and meet. Next slide, please. Something they did in Chatham, a conventional bridge often gets those, I hate to say it, ugly stone form-line concrete treatments. That's not what happened in Chatham. They used real stone anchored into modern materials. It's the kind of thing that we're just saying that's already on the table. That's part of the conversation. Historic designation or not, and again, I'm not saying we're going to build abutments this big or anything like that. Just look at the aesthetic treatments. We're already saying, yeah, that's in the neighborhood of what we're talking about. Wood railing similarly at the abutments, likewise. Again, not making any declarations that this is what we're going to do, but this is the headspace we're in at the moment. Next slide, please. We knew this was going to be the point of contention, which is the driving surface. And we're going to get into that a little bit. Again, Section 106 notwithstanding, because we're obliged to get a 75-year by federal highway, 100-year by MassDOT standards life due to the funding source, a timber plank driving surface allows too much weathering through to protect the structural elements underneath. You're probably all familiar with bridge joints that you're used to driving over that go ka-gunk, ka-gunk, ka-gunk. New bridges eliminate those because that's where most of the deterioration happens. So again, I'm not adding the merits of what you should have. I'm emphasizing the constraints that we have to operate in, Section 106 notwithstanding, that a timber driving surface is not where our head's at the moment. Asphalt, we're already at a no with that because we know asphalt is black, it is ugly. We are beginning to look at concrete surfaces, and we're just showing one there, for example. That's a generic one. We're looking into surface treatments that might be applicable. Again, it's part of the conversation, not declaring this is what's going to happen. It's just what we're starting to look at because we're starting to try to meet you, at least somewhat, in our initial volley. Next slide, please. Current status, this project's going to go out as a design-build project rather than a design-bid-build. It's a little bit of insider baseball, but the difference is design-build projects can move more quickly. They get funds obligated earlier and secure the project more readily. Biggest difference is on a design-bid-build project, you put out a full design, contractor bids on it, that's it. Design-build, we put together it's slightly beyond 25%. We put together a request for proposals, and it can be as prescriptive as we want it to be. So no matter where we land on aesthetics, we can be highly prescriptive. Then a design builder takes it on with their own designer, and under our supervision, advances the design. What this allows for is while they're doing nitty-gritty design, they can start work on the bridge. They can start demolition. They can start all that stuff. And so it's a way to expedite a project. Slide. With that, I'll turn it over to HDR to go over some of the environmental considerations, some of the design constraints, and then we'll circle back and we'll enter Q&A.
Thank you, Marco. I'm Ben Holzak with HDR, lead bridge engineer. What you're looking at here is some of the initial environmental mapping that we've done. We've already gone out to the site, done some environmental surveys. So there are some protected areas around the bridge site. Notably on the east side there's some salt marsh. And the area is also within the potential habitat range of several protected animal species. Next. I won't read them all. A big list of agencies. We're coordinating with all of these agencies. As Marco said a few times, we're very early in this process, so there's none of the processes have been concluded, but we are talking with all these agencies, and I want to flag particularly the fisheries. We've heard from several folks in the community that there's a concern about the aquatic life in the area, so we're talking about what considerations might be necessary to help protect that as the project goes forward. Next. This is a screen grab from our hydraulic model. So this bridge is subject to both riverine and coastal behavior. That means tides and storm surges in particular. There is a significant sea level rise that's projected in the area. So we're taking all that into account in our modeling. We're also doing some data collection to actually physically measure what the tide is and what the sediments are out there to help us calibrate our models to what's actually going on in the real world. Excuse me. So, yeah, the preliminary, again, very preliminary, but the preliminary models are indicating several feet of potential underwater erosion, what we call scour at the bridge, at the piers as you go across. That combined with the geotechnical information that we have is pushing us towards, these are going to be deep piles. They're going to have to go down to the bedrock, which is about 80 feet down. So they're going to be quite long piles that we're talking about here. Next slide. Some standards, go ahead. So we've alluded to this a couple times. So service life. MassDOT's requirement is the 100-year service life. Federal Highway has similar requirements. Service life does not mean that it lasts for 100 years and you never have to do any maintenance on it. That's not what that means. It means you have to do regular maintenance, but the primary structural components are expected to last 75, 100 or more years on new and replacement bridge structures. So the existing structure, as you can tell, we're here today. We've been talking about 1986. That's not 100 years ago. The existing timber structure has not even close to met that criteria. And not only are we here today talking about it, but those substructures, the piles that are out there today, those have actually been rated in poor condition since 2012. So the bridge degraded quite quickly from when it was originally built. Next. Elevation view, or looking from the side. The top of this slide is what you have right now, the existing structure. There's 108 piers on that existing bridge. The new bridge that we put out there will most likely have significantly fewer piers. With modern materials, we can have much longer spans. We're looking at 70, 75 versus 20 or 25 that's out there now. There's a lot of reasons to go with fewer spans and fewer piers in the water. The next slide has a few of them. The pile installation is work that has to occur in the water. Typically, it's one of the most expensive and difficult to schedule parts of constructing a bridge. Going back to all the environmental considerations we have when you're driving piles, you tend to generate a lot of turbidity is the word, or silts and stuff in the water column. So there are very often significant time of year restrictions, meaning you're not actually allowed to do that during certain times of year when fish are breeding or things like that. So the fewer piers you have in the water, the faster you can get it done, the cheaper you can get it done, and the less environmental impact that you have. And not only the time of year, but each individual the physical footprint that you put into the water is also considered an environmental impact. So there's a variety of reasons that push us towards fewer piers in the water. We did have do a study as well, just to look at what would it take to match the existing number of piles, all those restrictions notwithstanding. The preliminary analysis is that, again, because these piles have to go down 80 feet, because it's difficult work in the water, that would add up to about $50 million to the project cost. So that's it. Next one. Design elements and aesthetics, go ahead. We'll talk a little bit about cross-section. What's up there now is the existing bridge cross-section, timber bridge, 10-foot lanes, 5.5 foot sidewalk. Go right to the next one. This is kind of your baseline, one potential option for the bridge. There's a couple things I want to talk about and then move to what we can do. So we want to keep the relatively narrow lanes. 10-foot lanes is not what you're going to find on a highway or anything like that. You keep them relatively narrow, help to encourage people to drive slow across the bridge. You don't want to widen it up too much so people feel like they can go quickly. slightly wider shared use path so that folks who are walking over the bridge or biking over the bridge have the room to do so. And then to bring your attention to the railings. So we've alluded a few times to federal requirements. There is a federal requirement for bridge railings and traffic barriers. It's called MASH, the Manual for Assessing Safety Hardware. And all projects that get federal funds have to meet MASH. So that's a specific criteria for the design, and more specifically, the crash testing of traffic barriers. MassDOT has a number of standard bridge railings that are MASH compliant, or crash-worthy sometimes is the word you'll hear. None of them are timber. However, we do have some strategies that we can use to get a timber railing on this bridge. So if you go to the next slide. The approach we take is in between the travel lanes and the sidewalk and the rail that we're looking at, we use what we call a curb-mounted rail. So the one in the middle there behind me. That is a crash-worthy rail. It's crash-tested, it's certified to meet MASH criteria, and then that protects not only the sidewalk behind it, but also the railing behind it. So that's what would enable us to use something like a timber rail for this bridge to satisfy both the context-sensitive design that we've been talking about and satisfy the federal requirements that are a requirement of the federal money. Similar approach, if we go to the next one, we thought about, okay, how could we get timber rails on both sides? Use a similar approach. Put in another curb-mounted rail, small offset there for a narrow sidewalk, and then that would protect the other side as well, enabling us to get a timber railing on that side and a little bit more of the aesthetic from the outside, from the elevation view of the bridge that we suspect the community might be looking for. Next. Bring it back around to some of what Marco was alluding to earlier, some of the elements. So we've heard, even before tonight, we heard Chatham as a good example for what the community might be interested in. So the timber rail that I was just talking about, the photo over there on the left shows what that rail looks like from the outside. That is the Mitchell River Bridge in the photograph. So that type of rail protected from a crash impact by that curb-mounted standard rail is what we're looking at for the railing. Down below, you can see an elevation there, and in section on the right is the type of piers. So we spoke about those. The vertical elements are the piles. That's what's going to go down 80 feet down to bedrock. And then what we call the pile cap or pier cap, it would be concrete, but it would be form lined so that it has a little bit of the aesthetic appearance of timber. Next. Closer up of the piers. Again, this is Chatham. The abutments. So again, going back to what I said earlier, meeting both context sensitivity and meeting the actual design requirements of the structure. So what's behind here, it's not a stone masonry abutment, it's actually a concrete abutment, but in front of it, they've faced with actual stone. It's not a form liner, they're actual stones that are anchored back into the structural concrete abutment. So the concrete abutment gives us the strength that we need, and the stone facing gives more of the aesthetics and context sensitivity. Next. Driving surface. Again, Marco alluded to this a little bit. There was some discussion on it. The typical or standard or baseline would be black asphalt. We've again already heard some feedback. We're looking into exposed concrete driving surface. What we do typically for exposed concrete decks is we groove them transversely. There's some science to it, but basically if you groove it transversely, it also tends to increase the road noise. We're even looking at, could we groove it at a similar cadence to the existing deck board spacing, something like that, again, to show as much respect to what's there now as we can within design guidelines. We talked a lot about timber decks, so we looked into the maintenance of what it would take. Marco alluded to the deck not only is the driving surface, it also protects the structure below. So if you have a nice solid concrete deck, that's not just what you drive on, it's also what's protecting what's below. It's eliminating as many joints and openings in the bridge as possible. And when you go out to inspect bridges, that's where the deterioration is. It's where the water comes down from the riding surface onto the structural elements below. So Big picture, the maintenance cost for a timber deck is going to be on the order of double what a traditional or standard, I suppose, concrete deck would be. So that gets to the bottom point there that maybe I can restate a little more clearly. The timber deck would also not protect the structural elements below from the water, from the salt, from the deterioration. So part of the concern is that not only would the deck itself deteriorate, the structural elements below would be subject to greater exposure and greater deterioration. Next. The actual driving surface, some pictures of what it might look like. I know it's very zoomed in. It might be hard to know what it is if you're not a bridge engineer. That's what an actual, this is a typical grooved concrete wearing surface, much closer spacing than those deck boards that you have right now. That'd be something that we'd have to look into. It's not what's normally done, but, and then on the right is the more traditional asphalt. Next. Some items about constructability. Go right ahead. So, in terms of where the replacement bridge will be placed, what we're proposing here is to replace the bridge in more or less the existing location of the bridge that's there now. I won't say footprint because as you saw in the cross sections, the new likely will be a little bit wider, but it would be in the same place. It wouldn't be off to the side or anything like that or a different alignment. There's a lot of reasons for that. You minimize impacts to the right-of-way. You minimize the environmental impacts. The environmental map I put up there earlier had that big salt marsh on the eastern end. So if you stay in the same location, you avoid impacts to that environmental area. It avoids work to tie the bridge into the approach roadways. Excuse me. And it avoids change for everyone in this room and everyone who couldn't make it tonight, right? So the new bridge will be more or less right where it is today. You don't have to change the way you interact with it. Next. For the actual construction of the bridge unfortunately will need to be closed while the work is going on. So when they go out and they start demolishing the bridge that's there now, it's going to have to close down and it won't open again until the new bridge is substantially complete. So that will mean that for the duration of the construction, there will need to be a detour around up to the north through Marshfield. That's about 7 miles to access the Duxbury beach. There is still a lot of, again, we're very early in this process. So one of the things we're working through actively is the actual means and approach to how it would be built. So we're still looking into, how much of this could be delivered or built from the water, how much could be delivered from the land. There's a lot of variables in that process, so we don't really know yet how that will look. And again, harkening back to the environmental, we don't know yet what the time of year restrictions will be. So between these two things, particularly the time of year, that can be very restrictive. We don't know yet how long that process will take because we're so early. One of the things that the design build contracting mechanism can help us with is one of the tools we have is we call them incentives, disincentives. What that is it's a financial incentive built into the contract to encourage the contractors to finish the job on time or early. If they do so, there's typically an incentive payment that's structured in an appropriate size to incentivize accelerating the construction. Next. A bit about the design schedule, hand it back to Marco.
Thank you, Ben. Schedule. Even this is not set in stone. We will meet with you more than this if necessary. The first thing we're proposing in the fall is a design charrette. The format of that's different. We don't come up here and just talk at you. We'll be at tables, we'll have ideas, and you'll see shortly that we've come up with a way for you to contact us throughout, and I'll get to that in a minute, but we are going to want to hear from you, and I know we will. This is the high-level initial schedule. Spring of 2027 is when we expect the base technical concept to go out. After that, we have a design public hearing. The design public hearing is probably what much of you are expecting. That's when the DOT comes out and says, this is what we're going to do, and everyone has at it. We're very far from that, as you can see. So that high level is what the schedule is. As we go, these things will evolve. Next slide. This project deserves its own website. It needs it. All this material is going to be posted up there. And perhaps more importantly, that email address. This is not a black hole. I realized by the amount of contact I was getting that we needed to bring on some extra help. We have Howard Stein Hudson monitoring this email. They're going to monitor it regularly, work with us to come up with answers as quickly as possible. We want to hear from you. We'd rather hear from you as we go and meet on what we've heard than for us to try to come up with ideas and then miss the mark. So please, anything you want to send, please be respectful, but anything you want to send in here and let us know, have at it. We want to hear from you. We know certain things about what we've presented are not what you want to see. That proposed bridge is big. We know. We're stuck with design constraints, Section 106 process notwithstanding, and so we're going to have to work together over at least the next year in terms of where can we meet? Because I think any historic process you want to continue on, we still need to meet and see where we can get regardless. So, like I said, that's the way to contact us ongoing. It is monitored, it will be attended to, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. And next slide. Questions. Floor is now open for questions. I don't know if Mr. Cutler, Undersecretary Cutler, you want to speak for?
Good evening. Thank you very much. Josh Cutler, Duck Hill Road. I had the honor of representing Duxbury for a decade in the legislature. I'm just representing myself tonight, just to be clear. But I did want to share, I had a comment and a question. And I was speaking with Senator O'Connor, and I wanted to share an excerpt. I think this is already part of the public record, but for benefit of everyone, a letter that Senator O'Connor and I wrote that partially kicked this process off now 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's appropriate. I'm just going to excerpt from it. We'd like to take this opportunity to express our strong view that any design process must respect the bridge's historical significance as a wooden bridge and ensure ample opportunity for robust public input. Some bridges are just elevated roadways that connect people from point A to point B. Then there are iconic structures like the Powder Point Bridge that are far more historically significant. Over the course of its rich history, the much photographed Powder Point Bridge has been listed in the Guinness Book of World Records, featured in Hollywood blockbusters, and been the site of both weddings and burials. This landmark bridge is truly a treasure for the entire South Shore and the Commonwealth, and future iterations should reflect and honor that legacy. We respectfully request that MassDOT work with the town of Duxbury as soon as feasible to allow for adequate time for public input and to ensure that the Powder Point Bridge be placed on the Transportation Improvement Program list as soon as possible. And signed by myself in my previous capacity as state representative, and also Senator Patrick O'Connor, who sends his regards. He had a conflict tonight, he would be here. So I want to just put that on the record, and I want to thank you. I appreciate the collaboration and the spirit that we've seen so far. I understand there's going to be a lot of questions. I have some too, but to date, I feel like you've respected the request that we put in, and I want to just say I appreciate that. I do have a question, sort of a baseline question for you, perhaps for town officials actually. What is the do-nothing scenario? What does that look like? If anyone could address that, I'd appreciate it. And again, thank you.
The answer to that is Shane, a District 5 bridge person, who has to be responsible for the inspections of this existing bridge.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? Shane Souza.
I apologize. That's Shane Souza, our District 5 bridge representative. He's responsible for overseeing the inspection program of all the bridges in District 5. So he's going to be the individual best able to speak on the do-nothing scenario.
Yep. So the do-nothing scenario, we've seen it with a lot of bridges in our district, but in this particular case, it's going to be incurred maintenance costs for the town of Duxbury as they're the sole owner of the bridge. At some point, there'll just be so much maintenance that it will most likely require a closure of the bridge without a significant amount of rehab work, which we're probably pretty close to it at this point. And at that point, it would probably most likely require a full replacement. And I think, if we're not there yet, we're very close. And I think the timeline is good right now as far as our replacement schedule for the bridge.
Thank you.
Good evening. Oh, sorry, good evening. It's a little loud. My name is Richard Kleiman from 30 Chapel Street, Duxbury. Two questions. I did hear you say that the existing bridge would have to be closed during construction. Wondering if there's any way to keep it open. I imagine construction is going to take several years. Keep it open for pedestrians only. Build the new bridge next to it, and then demolish the existing bridge. Or one other scenario, which is probably not feasible, would be to retain this bridge as a pedestrian-only bridge. But that would, I imagine, incur further environmental impacts and other impacts that maybe are not acceptable. The second question goes to safety and speed. This bridge has a history of people driving way too fast on it, and it's a very hard place for law enforcement to monitor. And that has actually contributed to the deterioration of the bridge. But putting a concrete surface, for instance, would only encourage people to go faster, and I'm wondering if you cannot incorporate some traffic calming measures into the design of the roadway part of the bridge to help sort of self-enforce the speed on the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you for both those questions. Constructability and footprint was the thing we've been agonizing over for the last few weeks. It's so critical to everything that happens. I don't know if you all know this, but environmental permitting and right-of-way are some of the biggest, I don't want to call them impediments, but they affect the schedule a lot. When we got together with our geotechnical professionals, including those from HDR and at MassDOT, nobody was comfortable, given the condition the bridge is in, that while they're driving piles for the new bridge, that the existing bridge would be safe to use. We can't get there. We've talked about monitoring and this and that, and really the right thing, and I say the right, it's just the safest, is that while that new bridge is being built, the old one can't stay open because they're driving piles 80 feet down. There'd be no way to do it while keeping it open. Therefore, you may as well build it on the old footprint, only because that's the least impactful environmentally, aesthetically, however you want to put it. So did I get the entirety of your first question? Okay. The second question was regarding, I apologize, just give me a quick cue. Speed. Traffic calming. So yes, of course, we'll look into traffic calming measures. Obviously, noise isn't stopping anybody. I drove over the bridge twice today. It slowed me down, but I saw the sign that said, "Please save our bridge." Yeah, we'll look into traffic calming measures. And I don't know if anyone from the design team has any high-level thoughts on that initially. I know you're not going to want to hear speed bumps, but, you know, again, there are some contemporary things that I've seen out there. Again, we don't want to suggest anything that's not feasible, but if anyone has anything in their back pocket, got anything for traffic calming?
We've talked about options, but again, very early. I don't know that I'd want to float them, but
So-
we talked about, different ways of deflecting the vehicles.
The other, one issue I forgot to mention, one potential idea, if you cannot retain the existing structure during construction for access, would be to consider some kind of interim pedestrian bicycle ferry system during the summer months to help alleviate some of the impact to residents.
Let us look into it, please. First, I haven't heard that suggestion yet, so let us look into it.
34 Arrowhead Road. Going to give you a really softball right here. Okay. Are you going to make that presentation available on the website?
Yes, tonight, or as long as Aaron puts it up very shortly.
Okay.
It is, tomorrow morning.
Now one that should be a softball. The eastern end of the bridge obviously lands on Duxbury Beach Reservation property. So I'm assuming that you're engaging directly with them for their side of the action. Is that correct?
I talked to Chris yesterday.
Thank you.
Yes, and absolutely. And my high-level answer to her at this point was, nobody's expressed any interest or desire in changing existing right-of-way arrangements. And this whole project's about minimizing impacts, right? It's
Yeah,
part of-
I think you also need to consider the fact that sediment moves around over there. And so the landings on both sides need to consider that. So,
Yeah, and the abutments come into that too,
Yeah,
and
that's
how
what
big
I-
they are and how big
Yeah.
we don't want them to be. So that's what a lot of these meetings are going to be about. When we do the design charrette, there's going to be a lot of conversation around that sort of thing. So hope
Thanks,
I answered
Mark.
your question.
Is this now? Oh,
I don't know who went first, but this is arbitrary.
no problem. Oh, sorry, that's really loud. I apologize for that. Doug Ross, 71 Tussock Brook Road in Duxbury. Also, to let people know, I'm a beach ranger. I work for the town. I've worked there for 5 years. I'm the guy in the yellow vest, so when you drive over the bridge, I'm always the guy telling you, slow down. And welcome to Duxbury Beach. You have me I could ask 100 questions on every slide you just put up, but you mentioned you're going to be more or less in the same location. Do you have a slide that kind of shows more or less where the new exit and
No, but-
entrances are?
Let me let you finish. Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's question one.
No, but we can put together, so for any of the questions we don't answer directly tonight, over the next few days, we're going to put answers to them on the website I showed. And I think that's a great idea, is to give you a high-level idea. Again, we'll have to, because there's so much going on regarding environmental permitting, let us see what we can do to give you an idea. But
Do you
we don't-
have a thought? Are you going to be south of the guard shed, north of the guard shed? Is the western side going to absorb the parking lot that's currently there? Going to be any early thoughts on that?
Appreciate that. I'm going to fall back on we're so early in this process. It's something we're actively looking at. We're aware of it as a concern. We were just talking today about where exactly the new curb line should be relative to the old. I don't have a clear answer, but it's just because we're still working on it.
Okay. My question to that is that I want to minimize the effect on the resident parking lot. There's only so many places down there for residents to park, and I don't want to lose any spaces for the residents. Two, the height of the bridge, it will be maintained about the same? I mean, boat traffic can go underneath? You're not going to lower it?
So the clearances will be maintained.
Okay.
So the new bridge is currently looking at a very slight elevation, talking about 1 or 2 feet or so, to maintain that vertical clearance.
All right.
Very minor
And I'm trying to remember the slides. On the pedestrian walkway and the first cross-section that you showed, is that walking surface concrete as well?
That's our opening volley. Big area of discussion, big area of brainstorming for us. Not determined yet,
Okay, so that's...
but if you want the generic answer, I mean, that's where our head initially goes to for
right.
maintainability. But again, we expected particularly the walkways to be a big part of the conversation.
Okay. And the railing height's more or less the same that we see now?
Yeah, right.
I don't know the existing railing height offhand. I'm sorry, we would have it be, I think 42 inches is the pedestrian standard. So again, going back to there's standards we have to meet. So that curb-mounted rail, forgive me, I don't have all the numbers in my head, but it has a specific height. It's shorter than a pedestrian rail.
All right.
And that pedestrian rail also has a standard defined height.
Weight limit, currently 4 tons. What are you looking at now?
Unrestricted will be a modern bridge design. We're not looking at putting back any restriction.
No way.
So a dump truck full of sand that currently now has to go all the way around can come down Powder Point and go over the bridge.
As long as it meets legal loads in the state of Massachusetts.
All right. As far as the calming measures, I probably would be the first person to tell you to build speed bumps into the end of the bridge as you come onto Duxbury Beach property. I have 5 years of experience dealing with traffic down there. To the gentleman's point, if you put down a concrete, whatever you put down, it'll be from 10 to 15 miles. You can expect 25 to 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It's a real issue.
Yeah.
And so Anything you can do to put in speed bumps, calming, whatever you do, it would be critically important as people come off the bridge and onto Duxbury Beach Reservation property.
Yeah, and to echo on that, all the more reason the point you made, if it's a speed issue now, it's going to be worse. The nicer you make the bridge, the more, because it calmed me, but so I expect it's something we're really going to look into based on this feedback. Anything else?
No, that's it for right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm sure you're aware, 11 million oysters were taken out of the bay last year. Every year, there's tons of oyster farmers, and some of them leave the town dock and go north under the bridge, and the leases are in the bay, it's called Back River. How will they or you should probably have a separate oyster farmer meeting, because their requirements to go they go in the middle of February, they go in the worst weather, they go under the bridge, they go to their leases, they get back, and if the whole length of the bridge is not available, that whole lease area is off. So I would just suggest that you have an oyster people meeting.
Absolutely, Ben. You've had some conversation with the harbor master. That's obviously not enough, but let's get that on, because obviously critical.
Good evening. This is Paul Valella, Lincoln Street, Duxbury. One of my questions was the height of the bridge, so that got answered for now. The other one is on the possible bridge cross-section, number 2, which is the...
Can you bring that up? Sorry.
Trying to keep the bridge as narrow as possible, but still hopefully keep the wood rails. We were having a discussion earlier, and hopefully you'd be able to possibly keep this one with marrying a wooden one to the MASH approved one, where it would keep this one. I like the bigger one, the way it's set up with wood on both sides, but I believe to keep it as narrow as possible and still maintain safety and everything else, I think you should look at the possibility of marrying wood to that one, where you could look at it that way, as opposed to going another 9 or 10 feet. So.
Yeah. So that's a great suggestion I heard in the lobby. First, I'm going to go to HDR, whether that's ever been done. I'm not saying it's not doable. But
I don't know whether.
So we will definitely look into that. Something you all will need to think about if we do go in that direction is, what are the implications on the inside view? Because, again, just warning what that might entail, probably wouldn't be able to get away with cladding wood on the inside, because that would affect the crash test ratings of it. I'm just, again, we will look into it thoroughly. I think it's an excellent suggestion.
Okay.
I want this bridge I know you wanted this bridge as narrow as possible. I want it for you. We're trying to figure out how to get, and by the way, I don't know, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind regarding the historic process. I don't know that whatever happens with the historic process, that safety standards will be, thank you, George, probably not. So it doesn't grant you the world on everything.
That's right.
So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, not making any declarations.
No, understood. I think the aesthetics-wise, I was looking, because in this rendition, it keeps it narrower than the 40-something foot.
Yeah,
one.
I agree.
But from that side, you're not going to have a wood exterior that looks nice from a distance. So,
Right.
And thank you for engaging us early in the process.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Roger Grant, 26 Meeting House Road. Thank you for sharing with us and giving an opportunity to provide opinions. I guess, I would like to say that the rules of historic preservation notwithstanding, a wooden bridge is part of my conception of what this town should have and what we have had. So I think it's important. If it was up to me, the bridge would stay exactly like it is and not change, and we wouldn't have to have this conversation, but I know that's not feasible. However, I would like to challenge you to be a little more creative. I feel like what we've seen is a design, which I assure is a very good design, but it's based on some pretty standard practices for how to construct bridges that are in lots of places, not in a unique place like this and not having to replace a unique structure like this. So while we can't have a similar wooden bridge, I think we could have a bridge that had more wood incorporated into it than what we've seen. There have been significant advances in the utilization of mass timber. We're now building multi-story buildings out of mass timber, and other countries, Canada, Nordic countries, use mass timber to build bridges that have 75 and 100-year lives. So I would like to ask you to develop a concept that maybe it's not historic, and the historic question notwithstanding, but is wooden, is different, is more creative than what we've seen here. And I'm not meaning to be critical of your structure, but I think it's following relatively standard practices, and we have a unique situation here that as a resident of the town, I'd like to see something that better maintains the character and is more minimalist. I'm not looking for industrial strength bridge that you can, I know you have your standards to follow, but I'd like to express that. And as part of that, I think standard practice goes the way standard practice goes, and it's hard to find creative solutions, but I wish you would do that and look at the alternative total costs of ownership for these different structures. I understand that timber can be built more quickly. It also has environmental benefits over concrete and steel. I certainly understand we may need a steel substructure, but I would like to challenge you to do something more creative with the superstructure. Thank you, and I don't mean to be critical. I appreciate the process you're going through, but just wanted to express that.
And in my mind, I knew the first thing you all were going to want was more wood. So I've already been thinking about it too much in my private time, but we will continue to do that. We're having those conversations, and like I said, it's not your job to design this bridge for us, but if you are aware of any examples, I gave you that email address. I'm going to be seeing it every day, and we're going to be workshopping answers. Please, at a minimum, we'll have to answer you. We'll have to answer you honestly, and if you have good information, challenge us. I know you're going to, and maybe we'll learn something, and maybe we can get somewhere better. I'm not promising anything, just saying, please, the door is open for you to contact us about things.
Hi, it's Edith Barnes. I'm on 154 High Street. I just have a question. It's maybe more of a statement, but the bridge itself is one of our kind of tourist draws in the area. We're not Plymouth. We don't have the Rock. We don't have the Mayflower. It brings a lot of our economic money into this area. People come and take pictures. They have weddings. They have funerals on the bridges. They stay and eat at our restaurants. They go to our shops. Has MassDOT done any type of projection on what kind of economic effect this is going to have to our area? Because let's be honest, this is not going to be something that's going to be done in a few months. It's going to probably be years.
Yep.
So this is something that can affect our economy, which we have very little in terms of our sales tax dollars at the moment anyway. And now we're saying we're taking away any kind of tourist dollar that might be coming in because of the bridge for an extended period of time. And maybe it hasn't been done, but could it possibly be done? Because this will be a big effect in our community where we're already kind of on a shoestring budget for a lot of things, and taking away any more money from our pot could be detrimental to our community.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and I have no answer for it, but I will get you one.
I'll give you some homework then.
Yes, please. We knew we were going to get a lot of
Thank
it. We'll look into that. I don't know if it's been done. I don't know what context it's been done, but like I said, at a minimum, in the next few days, perhaps a week, we're going to have a list of answers to those questions. That will make the list. Mm-hmm. If we don't, give me hell over email. And
I can do that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Koss on 197 Bay Road. I just want to thank you and concur with Mr. Cutler for engaging the community so early and opening up the dialogue and communication. Two suggestions I think would be great in the future. I know how early it is. I love the perspective drawings and the cross sections and everything. It would be really cool to have perspective drawings to show how those different widths between 36 and 42 would look bird's eye and different mock-ups. So, and the other one was like to concur about engaging the Duxbury oyster community. Not only about access to those leases that are in North River, but also 2 years of construction and water quality and what it's going to do to the bay. So that's only two suggestions.
So very good. Obviously, the environmental piece is really robust, but thank you for that feedback. Regarding renderings, because we're so early, we didn't want to come out with you with a bunch of renderings that were dead ends. When we talk about the design charrette, I think you're going to see a lot more renderings. Please, if there's specific renderings, and you've already gave some, let us know. I know I talked to our consultant early on in the budget, and I said, boost that architectural budget, because we're going to have to do a lot of that. So we're happy to do that. Any specific perspectives you want to see? Obviously, there's some ones you might expect 3/4 from the from the shore, but again, it's important that whatever we propose has life. Those cross sections were not meant to be architectural renderings. They were really just meant to give you an idea of spacing. That having been said, we owe you what that will really look like.
Hi, Suzanne McCourt, 3 Tinkers Ledge Road. I just had a question about the rendering with the pedestrian bicycle way. Right now, I think you said it's about 5 feet wide, and that picture is about 12 feet wide. Is that a mandatory amount for that?
Yeah. So we talked to it's called Complete Streets, and it's a regulation of what type of facilities you have to put on new facilities. We do have to put bike facilities. There's a couple of ways you can do that. Presume that you do go with narrow sidewalks or conventional sidewalks. We would still have to put buffered bike lanes on the roadway, which would bump it out roughly the amount that the shared use path would give you. Again, these are part of the conversations we'll have about how we want to employ it, but I know it's unfair that we keep saying, oh, we're stuck with these regulations, but we are. We can work through that and see what we can do, but we're not just putting it up there because we want to force a bike path to make your bridge bigger. It's part of the regulations.
Sure. No, I was just wondering where it's like 5 feet now. Could you make it wider, but not 7 feet wider because of, I didn't know if it was a regulation, because you don't necessarily need enough space for 2 people and 2 bikers. And currently, with the 5 feet, like if someone wanted to walk by, say you had a big stroller or somebody has a couple of big dogs, you step down and you go around, which obviously if you have that buffer, you cannot do.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like you really need that much, like the 12 feet wide, but if it's a regulation.
Taylor, can you bring that up just so we can, because I want to bring it
curious,
actually.
because I too agree with, in a perfect world, we want the bridge to stay as narrow as possible to fit along the guidelines that it has now. I don't know if there would be any way without making it more cumbersome, more, I don't want to say more ugly, but more different or whatever, to have even the bike part and the pedestrian part separate, but I don't think that's probably going to work.
I mean, again, this is why we have these meetings, to go over ideas like this.
Yeah.
I think I get what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But if I try to give you a rendering of it, and I can do that,
Yeah.
would you mind sending me an email or something that articulates
Sure.
it?
I mean, I wasn't necessarily, it was more for my own information
Noted.
and understanding than.
Getting to the crux of your question, you want it as narrow as possible. And we know that. And Ben, was this the narrowest configuration we could get?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
The 12
so-
feet was the minimum, right?
Okay.
I know Jeff would have a little more to say.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Marco, as you mentioned, we're required to put bicycle facilities on the bridge, given that it has a high likelihood of possible bikeable and walkable trips. As far as the criteria for setting the width of a shared use path, part of the discussion centers around the obstructions that you have on either side. So a typical shared use path, we would see 14 feet. And within that 14 feet, you have to provide a 2-foot buffer on either side of that 14 feet, ultimately making it a 10-foot usable shared use path. Anything beyond that, we would need to request an exception, as it violates the design criteria for that. So as far as this cross-section that's displayed here, we've already at least taken a first crack at narrowing that down, which is ultimately that 12-foot shared use path, but if you take 2 feet on either side, you end up with an 8-foot shared use path, which is narrower than what a 10-foot shared use path would be. Now, I'll also follow up on the discussion about, let's say we went with a conventional sidewalk. We would then need to put facilities on the roadway itself. Now, those would need to be buffered bike lanes. In a typical buffered bike lane, it would be 5 feet of actual, and I'm sure you've seen these on the roadways. It would be a 5-foot lane for a bicycle, but then it would require a 3-foot buffer to the outside for protection from vehicles. Ultimately, that ends up with an 8-foot lane or 8 feet of space on either side. So ultimately, you'd end up with 16 feet on the roadway. So we have 20 feet now, so that would bump out to 36. And then we would narrow that path down to 5 feet. It ends up being a delta of, let's say, 7 feet extra from what we're seeing here displayed. So we've kind of already taken a first pass at it, and of course this is not definitive. We're still going to look at it, see what we can do, but ultimately we're kind of bound by the design criteria. Hopefully I answered the question. Thank you.
I just wanted to add the design charrette that we're having, where we can really get into it on paper together. That's really a good forum where we'll actually be able to talk a little more thoughtfully about these things and explain it a little more thoroughly, because we won't be that far along then even as well.
Hi, Mary from Temple Street. I came tonight with concerns about character and about durability, and clearly you're covering those pretty nicely. My concern right now is, do you have a method? We have about 16,000 registered voters in Duxbury, and obviously there's a keen interest here tonight. Do you have a method of communicating so that there's a much broader, that we all sort of know what's going on? And the second question is, do you have an elastic financial situation that you can accommodate, or are you bound by certain figures that have to be met?
What an uncomfortable question. It is elastic. Yes, it is elastic. As the design advances, we reprogram monies only when we are very close to actually advertising. Because as you can imagine, as a design evolves, real costs change. So short answer is it is somewhat elastic, not
That's
dramatically
good to hear.
So,
And
yeah.
about communicating with all 16,000 or 5,000 homes or whatever?
I'm going to defer to our public engagement consultant, Howard Stein Hudson, Aaron Reed, and talk on it.
Hi, great question. So one of the other tools that we can implement, we've got all of you to just give us your email on your way in. So MassDOT does also have a Gov delivery system. So it's something that we can push out communication. You do have to sign up for it, and we can definitely work with the town to help push things out as well. I know the town was super helpful with today's meeting, but we can definitely have two-way communication with, email us, but then we can also send you updates, and I encourage you to share that. We do have Gov delivery listservs that are as high as 5,000 people. So, we'd like to see Duxbury break our record for most on a Gov delivery listserv, but we can work with MassDOT Digital Services to get that set up, and we can email you all, and then we just encourage you to share, but we can also do things like pop-ups and be in the community and like places. We know it's hard to get people like to a meeting too, so we can also work with the project team to like come to places and spaces that people are to talk about the bridge that we know you care a lot about. I grew up in a town similar to this, so I deeply understand.
Gentlemen.
Hi, Peter Randall, Elm Street. Just so you have some background, my grandfather was head of the highway department from 1925 to 1965, and he never, ever closed that bridge. And it was because of this design, giving them the ability to change pilings in and out. Now, the new design that you have here is obviously a guy that did concrete, because he set the beams right on the pilings. You can't switch out the pilings very easily. But my next question is, does the 86 bridge fall under the 100-year, or is it grandfathered in?
Kurt, do you want to speak to that?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by grandfathered, if you could
Well,
elaborate.
it was built in 1986, before the 100-year now structure maintained. So, if we maintain the upper half of the bridge and changed out the pilings like you are going to do anyways, right, to the steel or concrete, leaving the upper half of the bridge there, would that be part of a grandfathering in and not have to be completely torn down and this concrete structure, loss of access, loss of everything for what? I think the last bridge took them, what, 3 years, 4 years to build? And so there was a long, around the beach. So I'm just trying to give you guys some other ideas of maybe a way to maintain the wooden half up above, but change out the pilings with steel now, leaving the upper half and not having to comply with MassDOT.
I mean, that sort of sounds like a constructability question.
Yeah, and I'm going to bounce that to the team. And I want to make sure I got you right. Leaving the, well, we use a lot of bridge terms. Substructures are the piers, superstructures the top.
Right.
Leaving the top intact, underpinning it with modern materials. Is that what you're asking?
That's what
Whether
I'm
that's
asking.
doable? Take it away, Ben.
Because from 1885 to 1965, I can guarantee you that every board on that bridge was changed.
Yeah.
Okay, my grandfather would have Walter Prince roam underneath the boat every spring. They'd figure out which pilings had to go, which ones had to stay, change them out, leave one lane of the bridge open at all times, and that bridge never closed.
I'm going to speak first because I have something to add. We will get you an answer on this, but I believe it's a cheap answer, and I'm sorry I have to give it, but the funding source that we're using probably wouldn't allow for that. I'm going to get you a real answer to that question, but that's the first. Let's set that aside, right? Because there's Section 106 considerations that are on the table. So we owe you an engineering answer to that.
Which I am.
With that, Ben, do you have a...
Yeah, I mean, my first take on it I want to be very careful with my wording. As an engineer, I don't like to use words like impossible or can't be done, right? I would say that
Everything
would
can be done, it only takes time and money.
very, very difficult, I might go so far as to say impractical, given the sheer number of piles and the degree of deterioration. Yeah.
I did want to add
Yeah,
one
but
thing.
we're still going to go another 2 to 3 years before the new bridge is even built. So
Oh, I see what you're
we're
saying.
going to have more closings. You're going to have to change
I got
out
you.
pilings again, closing the bridge for 2 months or so. And so all I'm saying is, if we're going to do that, why aren't we changing them? Instead of going like for like, why aren't we using a stronger material, a better material? Like you could use steel and pour concrete in the middle of it without doing the same damage to the community, because
Yep.
we all know that concrete gets hot. So what's the heat of that concrete going to do to these oyster beds, to the bay, to all of this other stuff that is, impact? You have high heat where all those windmills are. Why? Because there's pressure. Pressure creates heat, and that's what's, that's what we're going to do here, doing it like this, is we are going to change the temperature of the bay.
So I'm going to say that we owe you a real comprehensive answer to that question.
Okay.
And so on the Q&A that we're going to post, we're going to do our best.
Things to think about, that's all
Yep.
I want to give you.
And please, like I said, if you're not satisfied with the answer, have at us.
Thank you.
And if I could say something, thank you very much for mentioning the work that was done to maintain the bridge. I appreciate that as a historian.
Emmett Sheen, Powder Point. Many of us have moorings and boats on this side of the bridge. We happen to keep two in all year round unless ice prevents that. I truly hope that there will be accessible ways the whole time. There is one oyster grower back there, but throughout, and when the new bridges, they keep the channel, where it is, which I assume you would, but accessibility is going to be a key part.
Speak on it.
Sure, yeah. I'll preface first by saying, again, we're very early, so I don't know that we've exactly sorted out exactly what the restrictions would be. Typically, there would be a requirement that you keep the navigation channel open virtually at all times. Maybe you're placing the beams directly over the channel. You don't let a boat through at that time, but that's just how it typically goes.
Jim Sullivan, Wadsworth Road. Where in your design process do you cover off on perhaps what could better be described as functional as opposed to structural or aesthetic? And I'll give you an example that starts to cut across a few of them. And it comes up in the context of the bridge surface, as well as the discussion on traffic calming. Right now, the plank decking, although it is substandard in terms of providing adequate cover to the substructure and structurally requires a high cost of ownership, all that, it actually, in of itself, is a traffic calming device. The sound alone and the drive feel, which are neither aesthetic nor structural, cover off on a couple of different functions right there. As well as, obviously, the aesthetic considerations that have been raised about, a concrete versus a plank surface. There are some fiber polymer materials that are in use around the country in various contexts of historical bridge rehabs. I think they're perhaps more often found structurally, but I believe that they are used in some contexts as decking. And so you need a good surface to provide maintainability and protection for the substructure. But above, you have to address functional requirements as well as aesthetic, as well as structural. So perhaps we don't get away from a concrete deck, but perhaps there's a second layer, something along those lines, that lays on top that meets those functional requirements and gives you a more elegant solution to at least part of your traffic calming than would speed bumps. So I realize we're still very early in the process and we're getting into the details here, but I wanted to point out that there is this category of functionals that is neither aesthetic nor structural, yet at the same time it can be all three. So where do you guys address that?
I was going to say, that's your first question, is where is that? Is that in the FDR, Functional Design Report?
DJW is where
The DJW. So it's the Giant Design Justification Workbook. It is a stage of the engineering process. we will go through it, and that's where that gets attended to. Second, we've got our thinking caps on regarding potential places we can talk about with roadway surface, and duly noted, you're not wrong, it does have a traffic calming effect. I get it, I do. Again, I don't want to hide behind regulations, but we're gonna see what we can do. We are obliged by the NEPA process to meet you somewhere. Again, 106 notwithstanding. So let's see where we can get over time. I hope that gave you a halfway decent answer.
Duxbury Shellfish Advisory Board member. I know, I think the reason we're here tonight is because of the Clean Water Act that was passed in 1971, January 3rd, by the 92nd U.S. Congress. We have boar infestation here from the mud line of the pilings, which I think were driven to refusal. And the boar infestation goes to the +2 tide mark or a full moon. That's where you see all the deterioration in the bridge. I think if we were to remove the deteriorated piles at the mud line, because I know below the mud line, I've done studies on this, below the mud line, those pilings look like they were driven yesterday. If you take and use that existing piling as a caisson and walk in new synthetic pilings to the underside of the cantilevered part of the bridge with those 45-degree angles that are supporting them, that would work. The bridge would not have to be destroyed. You can still use public access and everything else to it as each one of those deteriorated, boar-infested piles are replaced. I know that the fiber app out of San Diego approached myself and my lab at MIT to do a mock-up of the fiberglass jackets, which are outbound of the perimeter of the piling. I suggested at that time that that would not work, that a non-shrink grout was being placed and wasn't being properly injected to the underside of the jackets, pushing the salt water up and out. I also asked at that time to those grout samples be tested at 7, 14, and 28 days for strength. Those were a complete failure. I think that we could use, again, the existing pilings that were driven to refusal that look like they were driven yesterday, use those as a caisson, and then build on top of those periodically. And do it budgetly every year for the ones that need to be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if we were in the historic preservation space, and I'm not saying we won't get there, it's not the direction we're going now, only because it's not where we are by default. That could be part of the conversation. I suspect, I'll get you a better answer in writing, that under this current funding source that might not be an option. I'm not giving you a definitive answer, and we will look into it. But it's not exactly a preservation exercise, but I don't want to conjecture too much. I want to speak to what your suggestion is. I'm just trying to anticipate a little bit where it might go. I'm not refuting the merits of it. I think there is merit to it. I just suspect that the current program funding wouldn't necessarily allow for it unless there was a historic preservation angle. So that's just a little foreshadowing. There might be engineering merits. I don't know that there are programmatic ability to do it.
Worm and boar infestations happening throughout the country since the Clean Water Act was passed. So everybody's dealing with this now.
Yeah. So we will give you a comprehensive answer to that question.
And we're doing studies on it now too, so yeah, I'd like to sit down with you and talk to you about it if I could.
So when we give you our first answer, right, and you see that Q&A on the website, email us again if you have follow-up questions. And again, we will be back. So we can have a more robust back and forth if you'd like at that time too.
There are many buildings in Boston that were built on wood pilings, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And they have to be surrounded by water to maintain their strengths.
They do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, I'm Brian Glenn, I'm Chair of the Select Board. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks to all of you for giving up another night. I see a lot of faces from
special town meeting just 2 nights ago. One question I had as I was sitting here listening to your terrific presentation, Marco, I don't know if it was you or maybe Ben, you had mentioned that with the new structure comes requirements to comply with current regulations. Do any of those regulations include lighting? The current bridge does not have lighting, and the reason I ask is on the east end of the beach, we have great dark skies that lots of us look to for celestial events or what have you. And I'm just curious whether there's going to be any light requirement, and if so, how we can mitigate it.
Based on that argument alone, I'd be glad to ignore that requirement. But we aren't proposing lighting, but go ahead and
No,
speak to
I know there are requirements that if lighting is there are requirements for how much it must be. I'm not familiar with the requirement that you must light the bridge.
And we're not proposing it, so I don't think it's on part of the conversation.
Excuse me, Selectman, can you repeat your name?
Okay.
Hi, Patrick Walsh from Driftwood Drive. I had a question in regards, I don't know if engineering might be able to answer this, but a lot of times we see new stamped concrete with color through it, and it's indetectable from wood or not. Would it be possible on the driving surface, if you use stamped concrete, to look like wood and maybe some up, some down, which might give you that tire noise and maybe help with calming effect?
That's what we're looking into right now, and I can't give you an answer yet because we're still looking into it, but those are the
Okay.
types of things.
Sure.
I don't know if I was clear about it when I was showing the generic concrete treatment, but those are
Just
the
those grooved concrete is not very attractive.
right, but form lining is what you're talking about. We are also looking at that. There's maintenance
If you go to Disney World, you
implications.
see things that look
Yeah.
like you're in, you can't tell the difference. Or,
Yeah, there's maintenance implications, but that would be the type of thing that we are already looking at
okay,
to
great.
bring to the table.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think it's,
Hopefully your next, instead of using that grooved concrete, maybe that's something on that.
yes,
effect.
that's our hope is at the next.
Might be more
Yep.
pleasing to everybody, so, good.
Hi, Gabby McNeil. I grew up in Duxbury, currently live in Marshfield, but this bridge is very important to me. So thank you for the presentation. Along with that, I'm also a bridge engineer. And I've been up here, I've been in your shoes, so I understand. You guys are doing great. My question is though, about the 12-foot shared use path. You spoke about the DJW, you also spoke about design exceptions. I also don't want this bridge to be super wide because I love it from what it is today. Design exceptions do get approved, right? I understand that there's a process that you have to go through with complete streets and everything. But for everyone else here, you can go through the design exceptions, and maybe that's something that you could do in the working sessions going forward, get the feedback from the public and try and figure out maybe not a 12-foot shared use path, but an 8-foot shared use path. I don't know.
We will not get in the way of that. If we want to pursue exceptions, let's please suggest it.
Great.
And again, we can do it as, we can't pursue the exception for you. We can't come in here and say, hey, have this exception.
Mm-hmm.
So please, if you want to by email, offer a suggestion of the type of exception you want us to start looking at, we can start looking at it. We'll talk to Complete Streets about it. We'll probably do it tomorrow. But thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Bill Godoy from Powder Point. I've been looking at this cross-section, and while I'm a very proud father of a 13-year-old Yahoo with an electric bike, I look at this and I don't think bikes should be sharing the sidewalk. I think they should be sharing the roadway. And I think electric bikes that I'm seeing more and more around town are making this bridge going to be much more accessible to a lot more people at a younger age. And so I'm just curious to know what your opinion is of having the bikes stay with the cars. They should all be going at a slow rate rather than 25 or 30 miles an hour, and leave it so the walkway is, I'm fearful of someone picking me off if I'm walking on something where an electric bike could be flying by at 20 miles an hour.
So I'm personally with you on that line of thinking, but I'll bounce it to you to speak on it more thoroughly.
Thank you.
Sure, great question. Yes, there are means for separating bicycle and pedestrian traffic. Typically, at least in this configuration, what that would be is not necessarily a 12-foot shared use path, but it could be a combination of, let's say, a 6-foot walking surface. Then it would have to be separated with a buffer 2 to 3 feet, and then you could have a separate bike facility or a bike lane that could be potentially at a different grade. Now, because we're required to provide bi-directional facilities, that would make that bicycle facility a little bit wider than this combination of a 12-foot shared use path. But I do want to acknowledge that it is possible that we can look at something like that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening. Mike Count, Arrowhead Road. Thanks again, you guys, for your presentation, getting the public involved. It's much appreciated. I just had a couple engineering questions. On the, you mentioned all the pilings would need to be driven to bedrock at 80 feet. What type of borings have been done to date within that area? And specifically on the pilings, what are being proposed for the type and size?
Take it away.
So first, the borings. So we've done, we're calling it a pilot boring program out there. I couldn't tell you the exact number, but we've taken a few borings in the water as well as at the abutments. It's nowhere near the number that are required to do final design of the structure, but we have done enough that we're fairly confident of what we have out there, and we have a few more that are going to be done in the coming months. Your second question was what type of pile it would be. I can't answer the second part of that about size yet, just because of how early we are. I don't know what the size or the diameter, I should say, of the pile will be. But the pile type is anticipated to be concrete-filled steel pipe piles. So it's a steel pipe that would be driven down the 80 feet to bedrock, and it would be filled with concrete on the inside, typically then coated on the outside with an epoxy-type material.
And I guess follow-up question, for the design life on those pilings with the coating, is that anticipated to be 100 years or?
There are some provisions. This is one of the things that we're still working on, but there are some guidelines for how much we call it sacrificial thickness to assume on the thickness of that pile. So based on how long the pile is expected to be in service and the exposure condition of the salt water, there's a particular guidance for how much thickness you should assume will get lost over the design life of the pile. So it's something we are taking it into account in the design process.
Has it been considered to sheathe those pilings with PVC, given the potential ice damage and marine board damage in this area?
We haven't looked too deeply into alternative sheathing methods at this point in the design. Again, I'm going to fall back on we're very early in this process. Typically, it's an epoxy-coated system, but I'm not saying there aren't other systems that we can look into.
Okay. And as far as the footprint and number of pilings, is it, at what stage percentage-wise in the design would you say you are right now for estimating the total number of pilings? We obviously have a historic structure there with, a great number of timber pilings, and I think it's the community's wish that whatever gets out there, as far as a replacement goes, looks in similar character what's out there today as much as possible. So obviously, if you go with a smaller piling, you'll need more of them, but they'll be less costly. They may not need to go as deep, given the bearing capacities and whatever the ledge height, is in that particular area. So I guess that's a question, at what stage is a feasibility study done where you consider, 16-inch diameter steel pipe piles versus, a 48-inch diameter, pile itself with larger spans?
So one point of clarification, I think the driver will be not so much the size of the pile as it is the structure on top. So the span length would be more likely driven by how far the beams that we choose can span. Because in theory, you could have a very large pile or even a drilled shaft at very large spacings and have very long span lengths. But would be a completely different type of structure that we have out there now. I hesitate to put a percentage on exactly where we are in the design other than pre-25%. But we did have up there, we have looked into the cost implications of increasing the number of piles. And because they go down so deep, because they have to be done in the water, like I said, it is one of the biggest drivers to the cost. So it's a function of cost and construction duration, because the longer you're in the water driving those piles, the longer you are going to take on the overall construction of the job.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, obviously there's matching existing, what we're proposing, and in between. We think what we're proposing is reasonable. Of course we do, because we're here with it. But that, that's part of a thing we will have to talk about as we go. We picked that section because it was the most optimal from a practicality point of view. We haven't settled on it. It's still part of the conversation. And again, part of the give and take with the community is going to be various aspects of the design. I hesitate to say that the biggest sticking point is going to be the span configuration, but it's going to be a tougher one to move on. So, anywhere from you're going to add more wood to are you going to affect the span configuration, that starts to get a little tougher. I'm not saying nothing's off the table, but it is one of the things that, because it's the most practical and I'll be forthright, cost-effective approach, we have to start from there.
Yeah, I guess my only suggestion is just knowing the area and, the characteristics of bedrock, along the waterfront, I would...
You want more, right? You want more
Well,
spans.
no, I would just think that doing additional borings at this stage, knowing the implications of pile lengths and sizing is a huge factor when, looking at the cost for one design versus another. That it may be a good idea to get more advanced exploratory borings done earlier on in this case than later. So,
If I may, and we are. I looked at the plan yesterday for us to go out and take more borings.
We're looking at a good deal more, in fact.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head, but it's more than we have right now to get precisely for that reason, to get a better longitudinal section of how the bedrock and all of the subsurface conditions vary along the length of the bridge.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? You want to add anything?
Yeah, this one. I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. Your input, your suggestions, your ideas are very important to us. And I just want to make sure that you sign the sign-in sheet with your email address so we can keep you informed. And we give you homework too, because you are our network here in Duxbury to let your neighbors, your family members, your friends, co-workers know what we're doing. And we wanted to come to you earlier on in the process so you can have a sense of what we're thinking and that you can provide us with valuable input. You know the area better than any of us. You walk over the bridge, you drive over the bridge, you frequent the beaches, so and we really want to hear from you, because with your input, we'll make our design much better than without your input. So just keep in touch. Go to the website if you have questions, if you need information, and we'll be glad to share that with you until we do the charrette. I don't know the time frame. Is it?
September is what we're thinking, but if it becomes obvious that we need to meet sooner, we can. Again, we hope to come to the charrette with more architectural renderings because that will give it life. We didn't show you any life. We showed you another bridge, the Mitchell River, and then we showed you cartoons of spans. We know that that wasn't going to be rewarding. We wanted to at least meet with you early enough. Once we have architectural renderings, I think it gives it more color and flavor. We take it from there. We meet, you say, I hate it, love it. In the meantime, we know we're going to hear from you otherwise. One thing that will be hard, and we're kind of workshopping, is how do we effectively poll the town? How do we effectively get feedback? Because it can't just be who sends the most emails, because sometimes it can be 2 or 3 people sending a ton. So we're working on workshopping that, and we will work in communication with the town as to what's a good way. And so we can even work together on that as to what's a good way that we get to decision making. Because there's different stakeholders in the town too, with different desires.
Yeah, and then I would like to add that I'll be the point person for your elected officials, and if you have community groups that need more information, I could be the one that you reach out to, and we make sure we contact you. And if there are any other constituencies that we need to talk to, please let us know. We're glad to talk to everyone. Okay? So with that?
With that, we're done.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.